So you were just saying you hate gear.
That's the stupidest.
Yeah.
So in high school, I found this drum machine, this Zoom Rhythm Track 323 at my local, like the music store in my hometown where I was trying to learn guitar in middle school and just completely hated it. I have no technique. I have no finesse, no nuance. And I just, I learned some open chords and just gave it up. But at the same shop, they had this like $100, digital sampler drum machine sequencer thing. And it was so cool because like I just touched it and stuff happened. It was so thrilling. There was no knowledge involved. You could just interact with this thing and it would be really rewarding and thrilling. So I was using it really rudimentary just to make loops and beats for like, I was, 16 or 17 listening to a lot of like MF Doom or whatever. And I was like, like, this is like, I want to make like cool, dark hip hop beats or whatever. But, I'm a well-off white nerd. I'm not exactly a master of that kind of thing. But yeah, I went to college. Then I brought this thing with me. And at that point I didn't know this is the Limsman demo. The BPM is at 120, the default BPM on the thing. Like it's like dun 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 dun. I didn't even know how to speed it up. Like my knowledge was so like incredibly rudimentary, and I'm actually really proud that that's barely changed. Like almost nothing has changed about Limsman in a decade, which I think is I'm gonna just embrace that. I like it.
So that was before college, right?
Well, I got the drum machine in high school, but I only really started to do Limsman in college, where I wanted to do a one-man band.
Right. And you studied ethnomusicology, right? As well.
I did,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I went to Hampshire College, which is a very experimental, like sort of out there kind of school. And basically you create your own major. And it took me years to figure out what I wanted to do. But basically, I've always been more interested in why people do things than how they do things. I think that's more interesting to me. And, I did this. I basically wanted to leave the school having not just written a big paper. I was like, if I just leave here writing a big paper, that sucks. And if I just learn how to write an academic paper, all it's going to set me up for, especially in ethnomusicology, is graduate school. And I do not like school. And I did not want to go to school more. Okay. So I was like, well, what's a way to tell this story and also learn a skill and also get people to actually engage with it? Yeah. And I was like, well, radio. I grew up listening to radio in the car. I remember in high school, I'm not proud of this, but I remember like listening to the Kevin Smith Smodcast. Like, I was listening to podcasts almost from the get-go. I'm talking like at this point, like 15 years ago or something.
So like right when it started.
Yeah, like I remember when they were really a novelty, it was like, hey, the guy who directed Clerks just talks for like an hour, or like, and he was talking about like, it's Kevin Smith. You can guess what he was talking about, like weed in New Jersey and his wife's butthole or something. But like, I remember like, I knew I just liked listening. I thought, it's such an experience, the theater of the mind, like it's real, and I didn't want to make a documentary movie because that's a whole other world. I didn't want to write a big paper that only for other academics. So I was like, I'm going to do this story. I've actually met my friend Marvin, who's going to be playing at the show that we're recording this at right now. He's a Puerto Rican man from Holyoke, Massachusetts, and he made black metal about his indigenous Puerto Rican heritage from the perspective of like, a modern guy living in a small city suffering from post-industrial depression and he, that story of him telling the story of his life and his culture through black metal was so interesting. Yeah. And the point was like, how am I going to get boring white people to listen to this like scary music being made by someone talking about something that they really would probably never engage with on their own. And I realized that medium of radio was the way to bridge my research into something that people could actually experience a little bit more than just reading a paper or something.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. And I also, in an interview that you did with Consumer Electronics, Sarah said that, most of those people don't like know that they like it, until they hear it. And they hear it, from why they do it. I think that's...
Well, I think most people, they read the premise and they reject the premise, right, yeah. And which I get it. I mean, sure, like, I'm as close-minded as most, I'm sure. There's plenty of things where I'm sure if I read, the one sentence description, I would be like, well, I'm just no way I'm going to go down that road. Yeah. But you really, the thing about radio is that like very quickly you can immerse people in something. If you're good at it, hopefully within 30 seconds you've hooked people. And that's kind of unique. I think really that's a pretty rare thing.
You mentioned that your intro to noise was the Corpse of Sid. What was your initial like temptation to start making it?
Well, it's sort of that happened actually sort of after I'd begun making it, because basically in high school, you're talking about the Sore Throat's amazing second record, Disgrace to the Corpse of Sid. Highly recommend it, podcast listeners. Seek it out now on Earache. Very good. But no, basically, I loved bands like Infest. I loved bands like Napalm Death. I thought that like short, hard, fast songs full of like they capturing this like emotional journey in like 10 seconds was like thrilling. You know, you listen to the Peel Sessions by Napalm Death, or you know, No Man's Slave by Infest, and just these songs are so short and compact, and they're just teeming with emotion and life, and they're so thrilling to listen to. And I was like, I want to sound like that. And what happened in my attempt to do that was Limsbin, because I, being me, it was like, what's the simplest, dumbest possible way to do it? And I was like, well, the simplest way would be to just be completely self-sufficient and just me and a drum machine, nothing else. I was like, this is so clever. The first demo is awful. Like it's very funny to listen to. But you know, also, you know, before that, you know, I'm a Jewish nerd, and Adam and His Package was a band I loved growing up, where I was like, this unsexy, uncool dork is talking about Enya and the metric system and stuff that he thinks is interesting. So that, I think that helped set it up. And then also Dan Deacon was really big when I was in high school for nerds. So all these like nerds doing one guy bands, coupled with the intensity of the hardcore and grindcore that I liked, I was like, this is amazing. So it wasn't really an attempt to be noisy. That was an accident, which I think is the beautiful part of it. That it was like just being inept and just having passion and a desire for something that was so poorly translated made it noisy.
Right. And at that point, did you already have the drum machine, the first drum machine that you worked with?
Yeah, at that point, I'd had it for a few years.
Okay. So that was like kind of collecting dust.
I remember, I was at Hampshire, at a very creative place, a lot of creative people doing interesting stuff, and I was like, I got to be interesting. I'll bring a drum machine.
Yeah.
So I brought it with me, I think. But that was the point where it changed from I'm gonna make some funky beats to like I'm gonna be a one-man blast beat machine. Because like you listen to Mick drumming in Napalm Death on the Peel Sessions, and it's just like it's nuts. Like, it sounds inhuman. And I was like, well, I'm never gonna drum that well. But I have this actual machine, and I know that if I misuse it, essentially, because I mention this a lot, but like the first Sore Throat record is called Unhindered by Talent, which is my ethos. It's what I live by. It's so sick. I love that idea. That it's so liberating. But then you hear things like Hanatarash and like noisy, a lot of Japanese noise like Mesana and Hanatarash, where again it's like single dude units just freaking the fuck out with no rules. And it's like, this is ecstatic. This is liberating. I'm not one of these dark dudes. I'm a very energetic, happy person. Right. I have my downsides like we all do, but like I think I heard a lot of this stuff, and it was like thrilling to hear people express themselves like that.
And you have like a kind of tongue-in-cheek, you're very irreverent with a lot of your things. Like, I mean, even on Summertime Blues, which is kind of my like go-to for that, where you have this very silly kind of intro, and then it gets into a race, songs about race. So what gave
racism? I'll just say racism before we're gonna
race
farther.
issues.
Yeah,
race
yeah.
issues.
I was watching a documentary on the Black Panthers, and like it's hard to not watch that. And obviously, there's innumerable contemporary examples of the kind of deplorable racism that exists in this very messed up country.
Yeah. So was that just kind of part of your personality that came through, that you have that ability to just change from serious to jesting?
I think that's like the fun of it, is that like, it's all heartfelt. Like, I think you need to be able to laugh and make fun of what's going on as much as like you can joke about the things that are around you and the sanctimonious nature of things. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not going to give examples of bands because, it's a small world. But I think, when you have people who are delivering extremely blunt political messages, that's a little tiring and condescending. And when you have bands that are like, I carve up prostitutes and I live in hell. It's like, well, I mean, you're a nerd. Like you're trying to get off on this experience of this illusion of power. And I think it's both funny to be joyless, and it's funny to be power tripping or ego tripping so hard that you can't laugh at yourself. So I think, you know, anything between those two things is fair game to me.
So your most recent full-length album, One Happy World.
And technically speaking, only that's the LP, you know? So
yeah.
in a decade, I squeezed out one official LP. So.
Right. So that your lyrics are very blunt, you know, almost like 2 words sometimes, and that's just the title of the song. And then you have kind of a kind of rambling sounding, I guess. No, they sound more accurate than
I can cut them down, man. Just say the word.
What was your approach to at least most of those songs? I'm sure there's some diversity in how you came up.
Well, a lot of it's just, you know, constantly jotting down poetry or verse that I like, or things that, you know, I really grew up loving like Japanese hardcore, and a lot of the lyrics for bands like Warhead or Bastard or Total Fury are just like really blunt and really to the point. And you know, obviously it comes from like these bands writing songs in English that they heard on Minor Threat records or Discharge records or whatever, and finding ways in their own style to like even further simplify things and make things that are really evocative and demonstrative and powerful sounding. And I loved that. Like, you know, I think Warhead, certainly songs like What to Do with This Yearning, like what a beautiful poetic title for a song that is. And there's like a question mark on it on the record. I love it. You know, or like, you know, Bastard, you know, Wind of Pain, Forget About Dishonor. It's like it has its own beauty to it. And they're you know, I really I loved how blunt that sounded. So and again, like the whole minimalism, it goes back and forth, because like the beauty of a band like Disclose, another Japanese hardcore band, you know, if Discharge had a 2-sentence song, Disclose had a 1-sentence song. Like that's so much cooler,
right.
You know, and like that whole sloganeering thing, and that probably comes from Crass or whatever. That like really that ability to like make these very, you know, broad statements that sound very stirring. I love that stuff. It's fun to write anthems. Like I think of all of it as writing little anthems for a room full of idiot hardcore kids to sing with you.
Right. It's anthems for the
new 7-inch coming out on Wyatt Records at some point in 2019. Evan, if you're listening and it's not 2019, I'm pissed at you. But it's called Blast Anthemics for a new generation of ecstatic youth. Excuse me.
Right.
And like that's again, it's the same thing. I just love these like ridiculous, pompous. Like it's so funny, because in my mind, you know, if you're putting out a record or if you have space to create something, it's your real estate. You can do whatever you want with it. Why are people not swinging for the fences every time? And I think even, you know, in these songs that are probably indecipherable to most people when I'm performing them, if you like go and read them, the lyrics, or sit with it and listen to it with the lyrics, like I promise you, like they're not, you know, it's all very labored over. Some of the releases are less so, but most of the bigger ones, if I'm putting out like lyrics with it, it's because I took them seriously when I wrote them.
So Compassion and Vision, that
was in my version of like a jazz record, kind of, where I got together a band that I love. Wyatt Howland on electronics, legendary noise musician, he had a dear friend, he's amazing. And my friends Eric Brown and David Russell, again, 2 incredibly talented creative artists in their own right.
Yeah. Eric's from here, right?
We're sitting in Eric's house now.
Right, yeah. And David Russell and Wyatt Howland, they're from
Cleveland, Ohio. We recorded it in Cleveland in the practice space. When I lived in Cleveland briefly, we practiced in this one warehouse a lot. So we recorded it there. And yeah, it's just like, again, it's a session. You know, it's 2 halves of a session.
So were you saying words, or were you just...
We were like locked in a hot room, and that shit's just like... That was a really grueling, brutal recording session. So a lot of that was just totally, that's free jazz, baby. The notes I wasn't playing, yeah, that kind of thing.
Going back to One Happy World, Kristen Hayter, right?
Yeah,
Is that her
of
name?
Lingua Ignota fame.
Yeah, right. She is credited, and you can kind of hear it, you know, in some of the songs, especially
Get Better Speakers, baby. Yeah, she pops on that. She sounds great.
Yeah. It not on my first listen. I couldn't, you know. And then when I saw it, I was like, oh my god, there's someone else singing, and it's her.
Yeah.
And what was it like? Did you kind of handpick the songs?
Well, what happened was, I had played a show with her in Providence, and we knew each other through The Body, who are old friends of both of us. And I played this amazing show in Providence. It was like Dave Public played, I think Double Dragon played, Noise Nomads, you know, Jeff Hartford, one of the greatest living noise musicians, Western Mass, baby. He's in California now, California Jess, West Coast Jeff. But we played the show together where, like, you know, her set made me cry, you know, because I got her EP, All Bitches Die, and listened to it over and over again on this one summer tour. Like, literally, it was accidentally on repeat in my car. I didn't even notice. I was just like, I loved this record. So I got to play with her at the end of that summer, or maybe the early fall. And yeah, she just like brought me to tears. You know, her art is really incredibly powerful, and her live show is, I think, very hard to top. It definitely, following that up, sucked. There's a you know, a tape of me with that set I did on it. I'm like, I can hear myself like still recovering from like Kristen's set. But you know, I was recording the record at Machines with Magnets with Seth Manchester, and it was a crazy session. We did it all in 5 hours. We did the full record and a tape, and then mixed it all. There were a few other mixes that happened, but I would say 90% of the work happened in 5 hours on that record. So she came in, and I chose to do some songs for her to double up vocals on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that was just kind of spur of the moment? When
no, we planned it out. I was like, you got to come and, you know, because I was like, this is the record. I want to have some more depth to it that I can't do on my own. Mm-hmm. You know, not only did Seth do a phenomenal job engineering it and mixing it and mastering it, but I was like, you know, this is a real opportunity. And if I can get Kristen to, you know, throw down on this, because I love all that, like, you know, guest vocalist jumping on the mic kind of shit. You know, it's delightful.
And I guess now that we're on the subject of Lingua Ignota, one of her posts that really resonated with me was a picture of her after a performance. And she, you know, said in her, like in the caption in the photo, like how she feels after a performance, and like it's just like awful and lonely. How do you feel after a performance?
I mean, it really depends. Like, you know, I think like a lot of one person performance things, like, well, I mean, she's the subject matter she's dealing with, I could not conceivably speak to. I've led an unbelievably privileged, lucky life. You know, she's talking about some experiences that are truly harrowing. So, you know, for her to bring those up, I imagine that's something I can't come close to imagine what that's like. But I know if I am not satisfied with it, I know pretty quickly. Like, I think I know as it's happening, because a big part of Limb Spin is that, like, there's so much interaction with the audience. Even if I'm not, if it's a set where I'm joking around and talking a lot, or if I'm set where I'm not talking at all, like that, there's a lot of energy in the air that when it's there, you know it's there. When it's electric, you know it's there. You know. And if you're playing a club, I'm like, if the bartender and the sound guy liked it, it was like a good set, because they don't have to fucking like your band. But like, how do I feel? If I feel like it was a slam dunk, I'm on cloud nine. If I think it went poorly, I got to take a deep breath and recoup a little bit.
Has it been more like cloud nine as you've gone on, like over the years?
You can't control these things, you know? Because like, if you're in a room where there's, I'm sure maybe only performers listening will get this, but like if it's not in the air, like if you can't feel it, it's dead. Yeah. And it's really hard to convince people to have fun with you. And a big part of the set, I think, is that like by making people aware that they're watching a set, they're now part of it, and like they kind of have to have fun or have some sort of like, you know, I make everyone complicit in the room in what the dumb shit I'm doing, and that's, I think, a smart thing to do, because then people are like, well, I'm a part of this now, so I think that makes them more willing to do that. But it's tough. Yeah, I mean, like I played a show at the end of last year that will go unnamed, and not the worst show I've ever played, but it's a show where it's like it wasn't, that X factor was not there.
If you don't want it in, was it the Full of Hell show?
No, I actually, Full of Hell has been nothing but a blessing to me, and those shows have been really great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I find...
I was at that one at the end of the year, and I...
Oh, with the one in Boston or something? Or?
Yeah.
That was in June, man.
Oh.
That was in the middle of the year. It's plumb in the middle. That was the LP release weekend. No, that was a fun show. I mean, if you remember, like, you know, I told everyone how I felt, like, when I got there. I despise Boston, but... the guys in Full of Hell always amaze me, because they're like some of the few people I meet in the music scene who really listen to a ton of stuff and constantly try to challenge themselves. Yeah. And there's a lot of very boring people in the metal or music scene.
Yeah, so, no, that was my introduction to you, was actually through you opening up for them. So that was I owe them and a couple other bands that kind of bridge the gap between noise and stuff.
No, I mean, yeah, I think bands like that who like welcome all the. I think people are so afraid of fucking with the formula. So when you meet a band, I didn't know them before. They asked me to play. I think they were on my radar, and they asked me to play a show with them in New York City, and I started to get close with Dylan and Spencer.
Was that in 2016, right?
I think it was 2015. It was on what was it? Extortion was going to play a show at ABC No Rio in Manhattan, and they asked me to open it, and then that show got canceled. The tour got canceled. I can maybe that was 2015, and then I met him in 2016. And this is good stuff. This is good podcasting right now. Me trying to, that's just, that whole experience has been a blessing. I think they really inspired me to take what I do a lot more seriously and to think bigger. And I love that. It's been a trip.
Was that 2000, because you toured with them in 2016?
In 2017, right? I toured with them twice, at the beginning and end of the year, respectively.
Okay. And was that like your first real touring?
I mean, when you say real tours, the first like professional tour, for sure. Okay. I've driven my ass around in compact cars doing noise tours, which, which have been unforgettable. I've driven many thousands of miles to play sets to people, which is a dream come true. But that was, wisely people, put money into it. I can hear you, Dan. You come do the fucking interview.
So, pretty outspoken about your connection to Berkshires.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was it like growing up here?
Well, we're not in the Berkshires right now.
Right. Okay.
Big ding against you, Jake. You're in trouble.
I'm sorry. You're not from around here.
I can tell. I can tell, Jake. We're in the Pioneer Valley, which is very different. But the Berkshires are like this weird sort of sad. I mean, it's this beautiful, sad, amazing place because like it used to be like the playground of the rich and wealthy back in the 19th century. Edith Wharton's The Mount. It was in Lenox or like the Lenox Club, Tanglewood, all these like sort of big cultural institutions for the well-to-do from that era. And over time, the population's decreasing. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of, the opioid crisis is certainly a big part of life in New England in general, but also in the Berkshires. So when I was in Pittsfield, which is sort of like this struggling industrial city in the heart of the Berkshires as a kid, it was a pretty worn down place. General Electric had its weapons wing, General Dynamics, there during the Cold War. So when that factory closed, the town suffered greatly for a long time. So in the early thousands, there was this like really scrappy punk scene, which we would book shows in like pawn shops and basements and living rooms, and that experience taught me how to rig up a PA, how to play bass in a terrible band. But like that DIY spirit came from growing up in a pretty. It was not a bright lights, big city scenario. It was not sexy. It was a lot of people like fighting to survive. And I'm a very lucky person. I'm not saying I was in any physical danger, but like, I think because it was not, I wasn't like, slipping off to shows at the Bowery or whatever. It was like really a lesson in how to make do with not a lot.
So that's why you hate Boston, is because
Boston's just a boring pit full of fucking idiots, and I hate it. It's
understand that.
Its major crime is just being a culturalist dump, where the locals are awful, it's so segregated, and then the college kids just flit in and out while the rest of it just like molders. Though I am a Celtics fan.
Okay.
Yeah.
You like basketball? What?
Baseball is my number one passion.
Okay.
I'm a huge Mets fan. I was raised in a Mets household, so I've been watching this season avidly. I'm going to go to the home opener April 6th down at Citi Field. Okay. See Thor pitch. Very excited. But the Sox are my AL team, so I keep it local in that regard. But yeah, basketball's great. I mean, the problem is come March, I would say the NCAA and baseball just blow the NBA out of the water. I usually forget the NBA until the finals at this point.
All right. Okay.
Which is good if you're following the Celtics in 2019.
I do not do sports. Ball.
You're missing out, buddy. You can talk to any stranger in America.
Yeah. Would you ever do shows with any of your collaborators? Or have you done them?
Oh, for sure. There's been a bunch of shows.
Okay.
Limsman's pretty like it's what I want it to be, and that's like very important to me.
Right.
It's always what I want it to be. And yeah, I've had the great pleasure of performing with some wonderful people. Both my brothers have played in Limsman at different points.
On the piano, right? One of your
my little brother on the piano, but also he played some noise at a show in Detroit once where I got a full beer can thrown in my face. on the way home from picking him up in college in Wisconsin, we played a few shows, and that was great. That sucked. I had a job interview like 2 days later, and I had this big old shiner from the beer can. But yeah, I've played with, again, Wyatt Howland. We did a tape called 18 Rack Demo where he played bass on it. And I just want to say, whenever I do a version of the band that has a stringed instrument, everyone likes it. And I hate that. You introduce one familiar thing, everyone's like, oh, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
You know, I've had people like, what if there were riffs? Like, that's the whole thing.
Yeah. You don't want riffs.
I don't want, they're useless to me.
Right.
It's not what you're here for.
Right.
But yeah, no, I like playing with people. My friend David Russell, again, we did a dual vocal set once in Cleveland. That was like a dream come true.
That must have been pretty cool playing with Set Start Sep.
I've now played them a few times.
Oh,
on the
okay.
radio show.
Yeah.
When I had my show at WFMU, that was one of the first big bookings where I was really thrilled. Of course, no one at the station knew who the fuck they were. But yeah, I mean, like, they're just one of the most exciting, hardworking, incredible bands. And yeah, they were like, come do vocals with us. And I was like, fuck yeah. Dream come true.
Yeah. That must have been crazy.
We've played at this point, like, I want to say 3 shows together in Brooklyn, at Vassar College. I think my other band, Cell Dog Imitation, which is now broken up. We played a show in this very house with Say Star Sept. That was a fucking awesome show.
Cool. And when you perform with other people, like live, is it more like the free jazz, kind of like on Compassion and Vision, where you kind of just
let it fly, baby? Yeah. It ranges. Sometimes it's. I think the beauty of noise is that a lot of people who play noise, you really got to embrace the chaos, and I think a lot of the people I choose to play with are ready for that kind of challenge. So I think there's some mapping it out. There was a short-lived version of the band called Limbs Band that was like the punk band version. And I once did a big set at my house when I lived in Amherst at a show house called Dad City, where it was like 2 drummers and a saxophonist and a guitarist, and that at this point was like almost a decade ago. Yeah. So that's kind of crazy.
And you got the name from seeing a bin of limbs, right? In the Middle East? It was somewhere.
Yeah, this is a long story, but I'll keep it relatively tight for the for the cast. Okay. The cast.
I mean, if you want to, I have no idea why that's going off. I apologize.
That's okay. I'm not worried. Yeah, I was in Israel on a high school program. I'm an American Jew. Got sent on a Zionist youth program thing. It backfired. I am not a Zionist. But yeah, on the weekends we were supposed to go out into the land and discover our people. And, as teenagers, we just wanted to fucking party and try to make out. And I never really did much. I definitely drank a lot, but it was like pathetic. And
alone?
No, with other nerds, but okay. Not a lot of making out on that trip. Certainly no Israelis thought we were cool, for sure. They mostly despised us, I think. Well, they're just like we're like these doughy, annoying Americans who just get to come and go. It's the culture gap is so huge in a lot of ways. A lot of sweet, wonderful people too, but I think we're not hard bitten warrior types, us American Jews, which is fine. We're our kind of people.
Have to serve, right?
It's military service is compulsory, but it's not like everybody's a frontline soldier or anything. There's a lot of roles you can play, or a lot of my friends who are anarchists who refuse to serve, like found ways to get out of it by playing up mental illness or finding ways to like game the system to just get discharged. But anyways, one of the weekends we went to go party with this Canadian fella, and he was a surgical student, and he took us to the anatomy lab in the basement of his college, Tel Aviv University in Tel Aviv, and showed us these corpses. And he like takes us down to the sub basement in this massive auditorium style classroom and unwraps these corpses and starts digging around in them with his bare hands. It was crazy.
Oh my gosh. Was that like was everyone in the group like, yeah, we want to go do that?
Oh, it was me and my only one friend. So just 3 of us. Yeah. Again, it was a weekend. We were supposed to be like, getting in touch with the blessed Holy Land or whatever. But yeah, no, we were probably smoking hash and hanging out on the beach that weekend. And he's like, you want to see corpses? We're like, hell yeah. And it was crazy. It was really crazy. I mean, like really it was insane. But on the way out, we stopped in the display room. And in the display room was like walls and walls of glass cabinets full of human genitals that had been like bisected and dissected and flagged and tagged, because it's an anatomy lab. And in the back of the room, there's a big blue box that said limbs bin stenciled on the side. And I was like, what's a limbs bin? Because I was just so like completely overwhelmed. I was 16, 15? No, maybe 16. And this guy just laughs and pulls out a human leg and holds it over his head. So when I was thinking about like what's a project about immediacy and about like the moment, I was like, well, that was, you know, that was drilled into my head forever.
Yeah.
It's like a crazy dream. I have to like talk to my friend who was with us every few years to make sure it happened.
Right.
Because it's like a fever dream.
That must have been crazy.
We got a few more minutes. That's cool with you.
Okay. Yeah. Another kind of thing was Bliss Tech, because that was a while before, obviously, One Happy World. Is it kind of the same approach as far as lyrics?
Well, I was living in New York at the time, and I think I'd written a bunch of records that were more, or recorded and edited a lot of more collage-based records that I think captured the anxiety and craziness of living in New York as a young person. And that was a record where I was like, I want to kind of go back to basics a little bit and write, you know, because I'd done 2 split tapes that I actually love. My split tape was Sidetracked from Tacoma, Washington, the Fastcore Legends, and my split tape with 2 Million Tons of Shit from England, who are this amazing noisecore band. One of their like 3 releases. They're amazing. But yeah, for Bliss Tech, I just wrote these songs where it's like these are very personal and very direct, and they're kind of bummer songs. You know, they're about like after a breakup, living in Bushwick. I recorded that in my room in Bushwick, and yeah, just the whole thing took like 5 minutes to do it. What you hear on that record is that's it. That's the one time that ever happened.
Like first performances.
Oh yeah, I think I got levels checked. There's my friend Colton made a demo, like a bootleg demo that I have the only copy of. That's the outtakes. So it's like 24 seconds of me setting up that recording, and then that's it. I just did it one time, and that was it. So it's funny that I think for a lot of people that resonated with people, I think, a bit more than some other stuff. But like, again, that was a single pass. That was just it.
All right. And for the last question, I'm going to throw your question at you. Your final question that you do on WFMU. Oh, you studied. But you already answered it once.
But this is years later. So
you're right. Yeah, no, that's what I was hoping it would have changed.
Yeah.
What would you suggest giving, or what album would you give a 10-year-old?
Man.
Right now, in this day and age?
That's a really great question. You know, I feel like mellow Josh or like slightly wizened Josh. I think about like, you know, something like the Woodstock soundtrack or something like that, where I'm like, you're just getting this like incredible cross section, or like hopefully someone listens to more Joan Baez or more Jimi Hendrix or more Santana, or like, you know, I think at that age, like to listen to like really free, unfettered, beautiful music, what a nice gift that would be. I remember getting my first CD was a Smash Mouth CD. And it was like one of those things where I was proud of myself, because like I grew up in this boomer household, you know, Talking Heads, Joni Mitchell, James Taylor, and I was like, this is sick. It's like fucking obnoxious and annoying, and you know, it was such like a 10-year-old thing, you know, and I don't know. I guess like I'm so much more hesitant to answer that now, because like I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, gotta get him Cannibal Corpse or whatever. It's like, no, like fuck that. Like let people gravitate towards dark, weird things. You know, I don't think. I'm not Tim Burton. Weird and dark is not necessarily what people should aspire to.
Alice in Chains to Facial Mess.
I'm not an Alice in Chains guy.
Well, wow, you're gonna hate me. Jane's Addiction. It was the
because their cover of Ripple on the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
And then actually, if you read about that recording, this is the darkest part of the interview. I know about like the recording history of the Jane's Addiction Ripple cover on the dedicated Grateful Dead tribute compilation, but I think they sample the original recording of Ripple and some of Jerry's vocals on their cover of Ripple. But I remember as a kid, it was like on that cover album, which I've heard a million times, and now I'm like a pretty big Deadhead. I love the Grateful Dead. Right. But like, yeah, the Jane's Addiction thing, like the drums sounded so big and cool, and I was like, hell yeah, you know. And of course now I listen to like, you know, Bill and Mickey playing Not Fade Away at Cornell or whatever, and the drums sounded huge. But like, I remember that being a big song as a kid, where I was like, this is like a little different.
All right. So decide on one album. Could you do that? God. Could you do that?
It's so hard. I just don't have a good answer anymore. I think maybe maybe I was like cheating. As a radio host.
You already answered.
Yeah, I know, but I think I like to make me face the fire a little bit.
Yeah.
Gaze into my own eyes, like Dave Mustaine.
All right,
it's a good ending.
Okay.